But this idea, as I said, it will increase profit for the one that gets it. And if that is put into practice, that idea, it will destroy the profit of the other guys. So take, for example, I come up with a solar-powered engine to run a car, then obviously diesel and petrol engine-producing cars are in serious trouble, right? So it's that sort of an idea that I'm talking about. May not be that drastic, but anyway. So when I say NN, I essentially mean that none of them has the idea. So this is the status quo, the starting point, right? So A and B, no, they have 225 each. So they can either both have them. If we didn't have private property, many people talk about licensing patents rather than outright sales, right? So then both companies will be able to have it. Then we'll have a YY. Yes, we have the idea. And the first entry in each of these parentheses is the entry for A, and the second is the entry for B. So YN means Y has the idea or has bought the idea, and B does not have the idea. And NY is exactly the reverse of that. Now, since they're identical, so obviously anyone who has the idea will have identical profits to if the other had the idea, right? So let's just take one of those two boxes. So let's take this one. So here A has the idea, it's Y, and B doesn't have the idea, it's N. So A gets a profit of 256, which is definitely more than 225, but B's profit falls from 225 to 215, right? So B doesn't like this. Now in a standard model, what will we say? We will say that if the cost of producing this idea to A is anything less than 256 minus 225, which is 31, right? If it is anything less than 31, then the firm A should go for this idea, try and develop it. And there the story will end, right? But here, the idea is not being developed by A, it is already there with somebody else, and A and B are trying to bid for it. And B knows that if B does not have the idea, then B is going to get 215, which is 10 less than what B was getting when the idea wasn't available. So we ask ourselves the question, what is it that B will do to stop A from getting the idea, right? Now the other thing that can happen is both get the idea, then they both get 235. Observe, then both do better, but no one does as good as when one exclusively has the idea, which is obvious because when you have a better idea and you have exclusive or monopoly rights over it, you make more profit. So it's not surprising. Okay, so let's so suppose A is offering 10, right? We start off the bid in any arbitrary fashion. Suppose A is offering 10. Then if A buys it at 10, then A will make 246 and B will make 215, right? So every time A bids, B has the option of overbidding or letting it pass, right? So simple open auction going on. Now B can offer 11 and B offer 11, then B outbids A who has offered 10, right? And then makes I'm sorry, it should not be 245, it should be 250. Sorry, makes 245 because 256 minus 11, right? So that's 245, and that is more than 215. So certainly, after this step, B should not keep quiet, because if B keeps quiet, B gets 215. If B outbids by 1, then B gets 215. A will not let that happen, so A will also go on bidding. So essentially what we will end up with is that if A is bidding, B will allow A to get it at a price of 41. Remember, we have moved from 225 to 256, and the standard literature would say that as long as the cost of this is less than 31, do it. But here, the cost is 41. Why? Because as soon as the idea comes to the market, the opportunity cost or the fallback option of the person who doesn't get the idea is no longer 225 but 250, right? So the gap is between 256 and 250, not 256 and 225. So this essentially means, and now I want so this is just to give you the idea of what goes on and why is it different, this auction process. So this essentially means that if the two of us, right, are bidding, you and I are bidding, we are A and B, if we are trying to bid for it, we will quickly realize this because we are not stupid. If economists can figure this out, suddenly anybody can figure this out, right? So we are going to get into this game. But not getting into this game does not make any sense either, because if I know that you're not getting into this game, I will quietly go and buy the idea, right? So we have to do something. So we will do some pact, which is where Gita will immediately, get worried. Why are they forming a pact? Right? Because we will get together and say, let us not get into this game, because if we get into this game, then both of us are going to lose, because you will, even if you win, you'll win it at 41, at a price of 41. So end result is that you will lose. So instead, let us get together, right? And let us now bid. And this was first started by this so-called Allied Security Trust, where competitors like Motorola, IBM, Microsoft, Ericsson, right? They all came together and formed this trust, whose essential job was to buy patents. And if a patent was bought by the trust, and if the members of the trust said yes, buy the patent, then all those members got free access to the patent. They of course had to pay, they shared the price, but after that they all had free access to the patent, which is something like 235. And now what the economists do with this example is that they work out and they show that yes, this is more welfare enhancing, which is obvious, because the better idea is being used by both producers, so they're competing with a better idea, so obviously consumers get a better deal, everybody is happy, right? So it is actually more efficient to buy through this consortium. If you do not form this consortium, not only is it not efficient, it may never happen. Remember, a lot of exchanges came up with all this technology coming up, financial markets booming and all of that, right? A lot of auction exchanges for patents were opened up. It's just a simple idea, right? It's just like any other financial instrument. It's a paper asset. It gives you the right to use the idea, which is already there in the patent office, right? So it's a paper asset. And this is being sold. So why not sell it on the exchange? Why not sell it on the net, right? So these auction exchanges were made up, about 3 or 4 of them. Not a single one of them operated. Why? Because all that the potential buyers did was follow a wait and watch policy. So the moment I see that my competitor Rajat has put in a bid, I immediately bid. Now I know once Rajat has started this process, I will go on bidding, then he will go on bidding, and we will both lose. So it's much better for me to watch every day, has Rajat put up a bid? Rajat is also waiting for me to put up a bid. And therefore we follow a wait and watch policy, and the auction never gets started. So this is where I want to stop. We have to look at what we are doing. We are now going to enter the knowledge economy. The title says, so near yet so far, rather cynical. I don't think we are not that far, right? We are actually so near, but unless we start thinking a little bit beyond, right, what we are facing every day, I think we will continue to be far, because, we are in a position where we have almost all the producers, right, because all the labor is here, and as I said, these are essentially idea producing labor, right? So, so I don't see why we should not start worrying about these things right now. Thank you.
As expected, Subhashish always leaves us with a new idea, and the problem is really for the regulators. And this is why I was always saying, any paper that comes up with TRI will have to keep some of these issues in mind, otherwise you can't define the market. My extreme left, Eric, would you like to make your presentation from there or come over? Good.
Okay, I stand before you bashful. I arrived Wednesday morning, and it's my first trip to India. So it takes a bit of audacity to stand in front of you all and comment on anything Indian, certainly. But I'll say in my defense that I've had 48 hours of excellent conversation with very knowledgeable people, and so I'm not coming completely without some context. What I'm going to do, and I'm happy that Geeta introduced the topic as she did, I'm going to talk about one of the issues that is likely to pose a problem for for market development going forward. It's been in the news quite a bit, although at the moment there's a bit of a calm. People have been referring to this. There's sort of there've been a number of waves of consolidation within the telecoms market over the years. We're at a point where it looks as though there may be another wave, and there have been some institutional change that may prove challenging as we enter that new wave of consolidation. And my overall message, as we'll see, is that this is actually, it's not a unique situation to India, and there are many approaches that will enable even the most structurally confusing or overlapping set of mandates manageable with certain sort of underlying consensus as to how to move forward. So what I have gathered over the last 48 hours is that in terms of institutional blockages or problems that may confront the regulatory environment in telecoms, is a set of issues that are in a sense historic. They're not unusual for an emerging market. They are all interrelated and can lead to sort of a vicious circle. If you don't get them right, it can lead to a virtuous circle of industry promotion and institutional success if you do get them right. I'm speaking here about capacity, the capacity of the regulatory cadre in this country. And when I say regulatory, I mean both sector regulators as well as competition authorities. And I could talk more about each of these if necessary, but I know I've only got 10 minutes, so I'll have to move quickly. There's a funding issue. There are legacy independence issues that have come up more recently. Now, these are issues that sort of persist and will have to be dealt with. There's another set that seems to be on the horizon in a sense of overlapping jurisdictions. We've talked about it a little bit in the introduction. And I'm going to focus on the mergers and acquisitions side of this. There are probably other instances or examples that you can identify within the Indian context, but we'll focus on the M&A side. Why these? One can anticipate that this overlapping jurisdiction issue may become a problem. Is that there are certain already there are certain attributes of legislation that lead to ambiguities. There are upcoming changes in the Competition Act that hopefully will deal with some of these ambiguities, but on the other hand might in fact lead to more tension. There's an increasing pressure to consolidate, as we've talked about in some of the earlier sessions. There's the recent guideline change issued by DOT, which indicates an increased flexibility, opportunity for mergers and acquisitions to go forward. And then also, as we referred to earlier, and there's another wave of telecoms development coming up. And there's that continual pressure of there being convergence of platforms and services which drive sector regulators and competition authorities to have to define markets in new ways and deal with and within the context of overlapping jurisdictions. So just in terms of what we find in India, in terms of the sector regulator and competition authority, we have a situation of concurrent jurisdiction. There is this potential for both sector regulator and competition authority to assert a right to review a merger and acquisition. This is not an abnormal situation. There are many, many countries that have sector and competition authorities with overlapping jurisdiction, and in fact, it's a relatively new problem. The world went through something called we'll call it an antitrust revolution, or a new appreciation of competition law and economics in determining how markets should be managed, and competition authorities sprouted up everywhere, and they did so in the context of a pre-existing sector regulatory regime. So Europe, United States, Canada, countries that one would think would have had more of a luxury to optimize a regulatory regime, they all have had certain issues. And some of these cases, you look at the structure, you look on paper at these regimes, and you think, how does anything get done? How there is, just to take the United States for example, let's talk about intra-functional overlap. I'm talking about here within the remit of competition authority. You've got two different entities, the FTC and the DOJ. They are both under one act, given right to review mergers and acquisitions. You've got the sectoral and the competition authority, the FCC, and depending on which of these two, FTC or DOJ, they've got concurrent remit. We've got federal and state regulatory problems. The FCC, its right for or its remit to review mergers and acquisitions arise from its right to approve license transfer. Well, there are licenses on the state level as well as the federal level. So you've got a similar sort of bifurcation there. These groups have different legal standards for determining whether a merger and acquisition is something that should go through or should be blocked or should be permitted with some sort of condition. For example, the FCC has a public interest aspect to its determination. So that a merger has to be determined to be in the public interest, not just whereas with the DOJ, it's will this merger lessen competition? So those are two actually very different standards. Very institutional the objective, the mandate of the authorities themselves may differ drastically in terms of policy or development objectives for the sector. And finally, there can be a complete absence of working relationships, formal working relationships. So now, if in the United States, the DOJ and the FTC built in a formal working relationship to the law, but no such relationship exists between the FCC and those agencies. There's nothing written down for how how these agencies need to interact. So again, potentially with all that, you think, how does anything get done? How does anything get done? Well, in fact, there are reasons why things actually do go forward, why things work. And I think that looking at the elements of these solutions may provide some insight into what may be considered going forward should the concurrent jurisdiction issue in India prove problematic. So, for example, and I'll take the United States because in many ways it's a great example of something that, again, on paper looks really bad. It couldn't possibly work, but it does. So there needs to be recognition and respect of this duality. So both agencies have to say, yes, you have the right to approve this merger. I do too.